Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to listen to me. The topic of the talk today is basically, what do we do when crazy people start using our software? And what does quality mean in that case? And what does crazy mean in that case as well? And how can we figure out how to improve our products by gaining deep understanding from kind of what we think are crazy use cases and make them less crazy and try to actually figure out what people want to do. So a couple of years ago, I started building my own products, and when the money comes directly in your pocket or out of your pocket based on how well the software works, I got a slightly different view of quality than I had when I was just testing software. And it opens up some really, really interesting questions. What is correct? What is right? What should the software do? For example, this is a log file from a few days ago of people trying to register and failing to register. And you can see that kind of people are typing Gmail mom, Gmail con, Gmalicom, Gamilcom, and all things like that. And this is a really good example of what I like to call like a double understanding sandwich, where the user understands what they want to do, I understand what they want to do, but the software doesn't. And we have this sandwich where the user and myself are kind of enclosing the software, and the software basically says, you know, this email is wrong, please check for typos. And kind of the really interesting question is, what is the correct behavior in this case? Should we report back to the user and say, well, how stupid are you? You can't even type your email. Or should we tell them, like, hey, this email looks strange, maybe it's wrong? Or should the software actually say, well, I know what this person is trying to do. Here's a Gmail address, he just mistyped it. Why not let them register? And kind of, I think that the last option is actually the correct one. Because by doing lots and lots of small optimizations like this, I've been able to grow the product I work on 500 times over a period of 12 months. And for me, that's quality. That's allowing and enabling more people, significantly more people, to use my software, and as a side effect, getting significantly more money from it, which is good for me. But kind of the way of getting there is not straightforward, because I have no idea how many kind of mistyped Gmail versions people will do. When we started this, I had even no idea that people will do this. But kind of trying to figure out all these weird things is really interesting. So let's get a quick show of hands in terms of kind of figuring out where we are in the room. How many of you had a situation where you thought the user is too stupid to use your software? Okay, almost half of the room. And there's lots of weird, interesting use cases for that. One of the kind of best stories about that, it's not about software actually, it's about a physical product I read, is from a book called The Startup Factory. And it's a book about the hardware appliance manufacturer, the kitchen appliance manufacturer called Haier. They're a Chinese company. They grew intensively over the last 30 years to become one of the largest appliance manufacturers in the world. And a few years ago, they started noticing quality problems with one of their washing machines. It was a very specific washing machine in a very specific territory of China. Everywhere else, the quality was good. They had massive, massive returns for that washing machine in that territory of China. And at first, they thought that they had some logistics problem transporting it there. Maybe the machines are getting broken when they're being transported. But no, they're kind of, doing well. All the other machines were kind of not being broken. Then the second thing they looked at is there like a manufacturing problem with that type of machine for a factory that's supplying that particular province? No, that's also okay. And then they kind of started thinking about this from a different perspective, and they implemented something that they call a zero distance to customer policy. Zero distance to customer is basically letting people who are in direct contact with the customer be responsible for figuring out the customer outcomes. And because of the zero distance to customer policy, they started getting the repairman, the serviceman, to talk a lot more to people who were returning the machines and figure out how this thing, why and what happened. And they realized slowly that farmers were washing potatoes in washing machines. Somebody figured out that this specific machine is not going to damage the potatoes when you wash them. It will wash them so they're really nice and clean, and they take a bit of water so they become heavier. So when you go to the market, your potatoes look nicer than the competition, and they're heavier, so you sell them for a higher price. And that somebody told their friends told their friends, their friends told their friends, and all of a sudden, all the potato farmers in this province in China were buying these washing machines to wash potatoes, and they were breaking them because of the kind of potato peelings and things like that, and then returning them back. And about 2 months later, there was a new version of the washing machine specially aimed at washing potatoes. That's why Hire grew like crazy, because they were able to meet this customer demand because of the zero distance to customer. Rachel Newman has a similar kind of idea, and she did this wonderful video. She was the head of customer service at Eventbrite, and they were in Australia. They were talking about this, how the customer service people, the customer support people, they have like an incredible wealth of knowledge. Not just about what went wrong with the software, but what people wanted to do. And that almost no company is actually using that information in a good way. And kind of tightening up this loop of what people actually wanted to do, this kind of double knowledge loop where the customer knows what they want to do, you know what they want to do, the software doesn't. And solving that is a massive, massive market opportunity, like in this case. So, kind of, I said, sometimes these things appear as somebody's too stupid to use your software or too stupid to use your product, and that's a very common use case, a very common way of spotting these things. For example, I recently started getting emails from people where they're claiming that the software doesn't work, and kind of when they try to do what they were instructed to do, there's no form to fill in, and they need to fill in a form. And then I replied to a few of these emails like, well, what form are you looking for? What page? And every single one of them sent me a non-existing page. I'm like, yeah, the page doesn't exist, you're getting a 404. And kind of talking to these people, well, how did you even get this page? Do I have a broken link somewhere? It's no, ChatGPT told them that this is the page they should go to and enter data in this form, and they were not finding the form. And what I did is I changed my 404 page, instead of just saying this page doesn't exist, to actually show the form that allows people to continue to work. Because that's what people wanted to do. I know what they wanted to do, the user knows what they wanted to do, the software is the only one that's stupid there. So, let's see kind of, do we have people in the room who's had an opposite situation where kind of the user was too smart for your software? Only a couple, okay. So this is kind of a very similar but kind of frequent situation as well. For example, we had this currency conversion screen where I was working for a British gambling company. Their product was working in British pounds. We were integrating with the US poker network. The US poker network worked in dollars. So there was a screen basically where you were supposed to convert dollars to cents, and pounds to dollars, and the other way around. One chip was $1 cent. So we had the requirement to round to 2 decimals. The screen was very nicely described by a business analyst. It was approved by a UX designer. We developed it, we tested it, it passed acceptance testing. And then at some point, kind of, the exchange rate was 0.54 pounds for a dollar. So there was a guy who put in $1 cent, converted into 0.0054, that was 1 penny. Took that 1 penny back and converted it into 0.185, which basically got rounded to 2. And basically, this is how inflation works. By making a robot that did this overnight, he collected 20,000 pounds and then took the money out the next day. And then when the whole thing kind of became known, everybody was blaming everybody else. Developers were blaming testers, testers were blaming the business analysts, the customer were blaming us, and everybody was blaming everybody else. And kind of the real problem here is that, again, a user found a way to use something in a way that kind of we didn't expect. So this goes back to basically an article that I read that changed my thinking about this quite a lot, by Scott Alexander. He wrote the Starslate Codex blog, and he basically looked at some demographic research where they combined demographic data like what your nationality is, how old you are, and things like that with some kind of economic behaviors, trying to find conclusions. And they realized that some people were really kind of doing insane stuff, like they were selecting American as a gender, they were entering Martian as nationality and things like that. And about kind of every survey they did, they had about 4% of these kind of crazy answers. And he came up with this constant that he said, about 4% of the people will do things you cannot explain. About 4% of the people will do crazy things, and he called it the lizardman constant, because he said kind of 4% of the people believe that lizardmen run the United States and things like that. So you will never be able to understand 4% of your users, but then the question is, do we want to serve them as well? I don't understand how somebody cannot type in their email, but I want to take the money. That's not a problem for me, so my software needs to be able to handle this. So kind of the problem here is that we start really thinking about what is a bug differently. And when this whole kind of 0 to 001 to 002 conversion got done, we had this horrible fight with our project manager. And the project manager said that we are putting too many things as bugs in our kind of issue tracking system. And I said, well, what do you mean we're putting too many things as bugs? The software has too many bugs. I'm not putting bugs in the software, I'm describing the bugs. And she said, no, you don't understand. Kind of, there's really two things you can put in the kind of tracking system. You can put in a bug, or you can put in a feature request. And changing the rounding is a feature request. And I said, well, it's not a feature request. This is idiotic. Nobody's rounding to kind of create money. I said, no, you don't understand. The only difference between a bug and a feature request is who pays for it. If it's a bug, we pay for it. If it's a feature request, the customer pays for it. There is no other difference between a bug and a feature. And this, well, I mean, this woman is clearly insane, but at some point, what she's talking about is what kind of most corporations actually do. And I realized that thinking about bugs and features as kind of right and wrong is completely the wrong way of looking at this. It's a wrong model. Because a bug to one person might be a feature to another. So I was working on this collaboration software for mind mapping and diagramming for a while. And we had this bug a couple of years back before COVID. This was before remote work and things like that, where one of the users sent us a bug report that the software doesn't really work well when she runs it on a fridge. Like, the fuck, how would you even run it on a fridge? Like, it's dangerous, there's lots of liquids, there's, why? And this was my kind of picture in my head, and we started talking to this woman like, give me the use case. I mean, what's going on? And she was a busy mother, so in the morning she was preparing breakfast for her children, but she was trying to participate in work meetings, and they had these kind of brainstorming sessions in the morning. So she realized that she couldn't just like keep a phone on the table there because she can't see the phone when she's moving around. Laptop takes too much space, and she had this Samsung fridge that had an Android screen on it. Like, why not? She tried to run it on that. It's like, but the software was never intended to work on a fridge, so it's not a bug. But then we really started talking about, said, well, in theory, we could make it work. The only problem is it doesn't have a keyboard and it doesn't have a mouse. And our software requires a keyboard and a mouse, but why? And maybe the software requires a keyboard and a mouse because in order to actually collaborate in creating these documents, you need to type. But she just wants to observe. She doesn't want to actively create things. And we created this kind of observation mode. We optimized the screen for working without a keyboard and a mouse. And kind of this whole thing became a significant driver of growth when people started moving away to kind of smaller devices and things like that. And I think kind of that's an interesting concept of figuring out how do we make things better, because instead of thinking about bugs and features as good or bad, as right or wrong, there's kind of some moral judgment there, we can talk about them as expected or unexpected. So this user expected the software to work on her fridge. I didn't. That's a problem. A tester might expect the software to work in one way, a developer might expect it to work in another. There's a difference in expectations. And I think when we start talking about the difference in expectations, then the question really becomes, whose expectations are we talking about? And there we have kind of roughly 4 categories. I think kind of one category is where do the makers of the product expect it to work like that? Were people making washing machines expecting anybody to wash potatoes in them? Probably not. And when I say makers, I mean testers, developers, product people, UX people, everybody who's kind of attending conferences like this. And then we have, do the users expect it to work in this way or not? So these kind of diagonal categories are easy. Kind of if you don't expect it, the users don't expect it, it's a bug. If you expect it to work like that, the users expect it to work like that, that's kind of acceptable, that's past acceptance test, that's okay. But then there's these 2 other categories that are really, really interesting. And this is where I think we need to start focusing as a community a lot more, instead of ignoring these 2 things. And in a wonderful book called Mismatch, Kat Holmes, who worked at Microsoft on usability and UX research and things like that, talks about this concept of a mismatch between a user's abilities or user's environment and the product. So a user might be doing crazy things like mistyping their email because of a mismatch between their motoric abilities and the product. Or they might be doing it because they're outside in bright sunlight, they don't see the screen really well, there's no problem in the motoric abilities, there's a mismatch between the environment and what the application does. Or they might be doing it for a million other reasons, including cognitive mismatch. Some people are genuinely too stupid. But then there's kind of this other category as well, like somebody being too smart and figuring out how to exploit the software. That's really, really interesting as well. And I think these 2 things are critical to look at if you want to understand quality. They're critical to consider when we're thinking about quality and designing for quality and testing for quality, because mismatches and exploits are hidden product opportunities. This is how we can build quality into the software. For example, in late 90s, there was a guy called Max Levchin who was incredibly smart. He still is incredibly smart. And being incredibly smart, he was able to create an incredibly efficient cryptographic library. And then he said, so what? Like, what do I do with this shit now? So then he started thinking about, well, you know, it's cryptography, so we can use it to protect something valuable, and it's incredibly efficient, so we can run it on low-power devices. Less efficient in cryptographic libraries can't run on low-power devices. So mobile devices in late 90s were low-power devices. He can run this cryptography on a mobile device. Like, why would people need cryptography on a mobile device? Well, you know, you can protect something that's important on a mobile device like money. Well, and then he got some funding to create a product, basically, that would use his library, and you could store money on your Palm Pilot mobile device. Palm Pilots were a thing then. And you can come to another person that has the same app on a Palm Pilot device and kind of bang them together, and the money will jump across. It was a really nice gimmick. They were showing it to investors. Investors gave them some money. It was really, really good. The problem was that people didn't have Palm Pilot devices back then. There wasn't a lot of kind of users there. And even then, kind of paying for Palm Pilot banging wasn't really that good. Nobody accepted those payments. But as a way of testing the product, they built a website for people that didn't have a Palm Pilot device, so they could very easily kind of send money and things like that, and just release the website. And in his own words, described in Jessica Livingston's book, Founders at Work, Max said that the website was unsexy and uncool. Nobody invested in the website. It was just like a demo thing. A year after they released it, they ran the numbers. The Palm Pilot application had 12,000 users. the website had 1.5 million. And they realized that people are using this website instead of downloading the Palm Pilot app. And what they should have done is use the website to download the Palm Pilot app, so the product management started fighting the website users. They started blocking downloads, they started finding where people are just using the website to transfer money and chasing those people on places like eBay to forbid them from using it and forbid them from using the trademark, until somebody realized, wait a moment, the product is the website. And they shut down the Palm Pilot app, and you know this company today as PayPal, because they realized kind of that people exploiting them in ways they didn't expect is actually the main use case. And I think this is where lots of these interesting opportunities open up when you start thinking about them. In Harvard Business Review, Amy Gallo wrote this really interesting article where she said that if you can improve the retention by just 5%, you can increase the profit of your product between 25 and 95%. And this kind of whole tug of war between getting new people in to fuel growth and keeping existing people to use the product more to fuel growth is interesting, because once the product actually has a user, most of the difficult work is done. Most of the marketing, most of the kind of somebody's on your website, they came through a hallucinated URL that ChatGPT gave them, but they came to your website. Your website can keep them, or your website can tell them to go somewhere else. And by kind of figuring out these use cases and keeping these users, we can create disproportional growth. That's why this is interesting. A lot of what people in this room can do cannot influence marketing, cannot influence bringing new people acquisition, but we can influence what the product does. So we can influence this. For example, one of the products I'm working on allows people to convert PowerPoints to videos. You type in what you want the video to voiceover to say in presenter notes, you upload the PowerPoint, this uses kind of text-to-speech voices to create a video, it generates the video, that's it. And I had this kind of really weird issue where somebody reported a bug with the whole text-to-speech conversion, and I downloaded a PowerPoint, and the video was blank. There was no visuals in it, just the voice, and I thought there was a bug in my software. And I started talking to this person like, well, you know, it looks like the video is blank, maybe we have a problem with this. And he said, no, the problem is not the visuals, it's the audio. I said, yeah, but that's fine, we'll fix the audio problem, but the video is blank. And he said, that's fine. I'm like, why are you paying me to create a blank video? And it turns out that we optimized the text-to-speech thing so much that people were justifying going through the whole exercise of creating a blank PowerPoint, putting the text-to-speech script there, waiting for the video to create, downloading the video, then putting the video into a video editing tool just to pull out the audio track and then using the audio track for something else. And this is idiotic. We're just kind of putting obstacles in front of people. This is obviously something I've not thought about. And maybe we can keep these users more. And we created a screen for people to just upload a Word document instead of uploading PowerPoint. A few months later, there were as many audio files built as there were PowerPoints. And then audio started growing and growing and growing. And then at some point, the situation was this. This is kind of a dashboard for the product. In this period, there were like 264 videos built and 124,000 audio files built. There's a 500 times growth in usage just because we implemented a crazy use case that we didn't think about. And that's kind of why I think we should optimize for lizards, why I think we should monitor for lizards actively and figure out what's unexpected, how are people exploiting our software for unintended use cases, and what are the mismatches that people are having and kind of optimize it for this. So there's a couple of steps in this process. I said it's not trivial kind of to that. The first step is kind of to learn how people are misusing your product actively. And this is where testers can help quite a lot, because we have tools to figure out how the software is misbehaving when we're testing it. We can use the same kind of tools to figure out how the software is misbehaving in production. We need to close that loop. So, for example, I've mentioned this kind of screen where you can upload a Word document. It looks like this. There's an upload file button, you know, Not very, very kind of strange. But when you upload the file, and you upload the file that is in unsupported format, a user gets to see an error message like this. Hey, you tried to upload the PNG file to a text-to-speech system. This makes no sense. Are you crazy? What are you trying to do with this? But instead of just showing the error message, and if you remember one thing from this talk, remember this. Every time your software shows an error message, instead of just showing an error message, log it somewhere. Log the fact that this thing happened. So you can look at these logs. And then you can look at these logs and you can see, well, we had 100 people in one day uploading APK files or trying to upload APK files. APK files are Android package applications to text-to-speech system. Why? No idea. I still cannot explain this. I think the best explanation for this is kind of similar to one of these kind of hacks where you leave a USB stick outside of an office and you hope that somebody's going to stick it in. So they try to upload an Android application hoping that somebody's going to install it on an Android phone to see what it does. I don't know. I'll never solve this use case. But people were uploading MP3 files. It's like, why would you upload an MP3 file to a text-to-speech system? It's already audio. And it turns out, well, people were trying to create background music for their voiceovers for company kind of call centers. Okay, I mean, we can do that. And then we had people uploading weird files like SRT. SRT are subtitle files for videos. They have a timestamp and a sentence, timestamp sentence. Video players use it to show subtitles. And I said, well, this is just a text file. We don't have to reject this. We can accept it. It's a text file. And then people started complaining how it's reading the timestamps. I said, well, yeah, you uploaded a file that has timestamps. It's reading timestamps. What did you expect? He said, well, we expected it to be synchronized with the timestamps. I said, oh, that's an interesting problem. And I thought, well, I mean, technically it's an interesting problem to make. You can't speed up voice without distorting the pitch and things like that. So I spent a couple of hours fixing this. By far, the most profitable 2 hours in my life. Because a week after I implemented this, a massive enterprise software company realized that they can just upload subtitles from their training videos and create voiceover in 50 different languages. And they wanted to convert 200,000 videos through my system. So again, a really weird case where you would expect a product manager to say, well, yes, but only 0.1% of the users do this. But by supporting 0.1% of the users, we got so much more money than it's just crazy. So when you start doing this, the problem is there's so many logs, there's kind of so much noise, it's so difficult to get a signal from the noise. And you'll want to chase lots and lots of different things. So step number 2 is to focus on one behavior change at a time. Figure out one thing you want to improve and focus on that. Do some exploratory testing, do some research, figure this thing out. And when you start doing that, you're going to start consolidating those logs from something that looks like this in something that looks like this. And this was where I was starting to log when people are getting empty audio files. People are getting empty audio files when they're trying to, for example, use a voice that doesn't know how to read Hindi to read Hindi. So somebody tried to use a voice called Charles to read Russian. Somebody tried to use a Arabic voice to read Latin script and things like that. And it's okay, now I see a pattern here. Once you start clearing up the mess, you see a pattern. And then we can start thinking about how do we solve this. So the first thing I did was create a nice error message where we were logging this stuff to figure it out. And it said, well, you're trying to use a voice that can only read Latin script, and your script is in Hindi. This doesn't work. Choose a different voice. Now, that doesn't work because, by definition, these people do unexpected things. So their logic is lizard logic. Their logic is not human logic. And immediately after I did the error message to log this better, I got an email from somebody saying that they tried to use a Canadian voice, and the software told them that they have to put in Latin, and that's bizarre because whatever. And I looked at the script they uploaded, it was 100 equal signs. There was no text in it. Like why this person uploaded 100 equal signs, I'll never understand, but it doesn't matter. So logging showing an error message and logging to see that you've identified this use case is the first thing, but then trying to actually figure out what they're trying to do and get them over the hurdle is really important. So Cathy Sierra in her book Badass talks about how when a person starts using your software, there's a critical 30-minute period where they need to jump over a threshold she calls the suck zone. And she says that when people start to use your software, they get into the thing where it's unfamiliar and they hate using it. And the faster they can do the basics, the faster they start tolerating all the other stuff. People who can do the basics and are familiar with your stuff will tolerate bugs. They'll work with workarounds, they'll figure out, but bugs in this part throw users out. And kind of the critical thing is to figure out how do we get people over this suck threshold. And part of it is then analyzing what these people are actually trying to do, the double loop sandwich, and then trying to figure out how do we kind of remove obstacles from these people's success. What obstacles are we putting in front of people? So one of the things I was putting in front of people is forcing them to choose a voice kind of on their own. And I said, well, I can guess the language from most of these scripts. So if you put in something that the voice can't read, I can just say, well, you know, you've put in this, it looks like Bangla. Unicode has like a region for Bangla, I can detect that. Here are the voices that can read Bangla. Just like, click this button and proceed. You don't have to read an error message, you don't have to kind of do anything. So we're removing obstacles to people's success. We're kind of just pushing people through. Now, again, the problem with this is that you're mostly working with people who don't follow your logic. So you need to figure out whether your solution is the actual kind of solution that works. That means we have to measure. And this is again where we can use the tools we use for software testing and for DevOps and for observability to figure out whether we're doing the right things. So Ron Kohavi became famous in 2009 by actually following through on PowerPoints that were justifying Microsoft's initiatives internally, and then trying to measure whether the things that were promised in the PowerPoints actually came true. And he published some papers about it, and he started writing a book, and he finally published a book 2 years ago called Trustworthy Online Controlled Experimentation, where he has data from lots of companies. And you should read the book. I'm just going to kind of pull some things out of context now. He talks about how at Microsoft, about 30% of ideas they tested actually deliver value they were supposed to deliver. About 70 don't. At better optimized domains, like Google, where the homepage already does most of what people need to do, or introducing new features, like 1 out of 10 features actually delivers value. There's data from Netflix, Slack, and other companies. So kind of, if this is like this for normal people, then implementing something that's supposed to improve the work of people who do crazy things is even worse, and we need to measure this. So you need to put in lots and lots of metrics. These were my metrics for kind of the text-to-audio conversion. And then when I did the call, kind of the first thing we did is all the Indian languages and Hebrew and languages where Unicode makes it easy to guess what the language is. And this is what happened after that. This is kind of the usage graph of kind of active text-to-speech conversions. It's like, whoa, this is amazing. And then I looked at some other metrics that were measuring money and realized that none of these people are actually paying me anything. And I looked at some other metrics and I realized that because we've optimized it for all these Indian languages, 99% of the usage on the site is now for Indian languages and nobody's paying anything. And I didn't really know what's going on, but I realized that if this keeps growing like this very quickly, the companies go bankrupt. So as a wholly kind of wrong decision, but it was an impulse decision that I did just to kind of stop the money flowing away, I blocked access from India completely. And then this happened the next day, which was really interesting. And we had hundreds of thousands of users from Czech Republic and Monaco making Indian language audio. And I realized these people are just using VPNs. And I found a video on YouTube where somebody realized how to abuse the free tier of my system by kind of switching through VPNs. And it was in Hindi, I didn't understand it, but somewhere halfway through it says VPN, 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 which I understood. I said, these people are using VPNs. India is not a problem. I shouldn't block 1/5 of like humans from accessing my system. I should just block people who are using VPNs. And that's what I did, kind of. And again, the first step is show an error message and log it, so you can figure out what's going on. So this was basically, hey, you are trying to access from a VPN, you're blocked. Disable the VPN access and then we can talk. And then kind of tomorrow this thing happened, which meant that I kind of figured out what the problem was. But now there was a significant drop in usage, which wasn't that good. And that was kind of not really expected what I hoped it would happen. So kind of step number 4 really here is to detect unintended impacts. Because these people are not following my logic and your logic, there's going to be a lot of unintended impacts. You try to do one thing, something else happens. You try to help people in one way, they kind of abuse the system in an even better way. And looking for unexpected impacts is really, really important. So kind of one of the kind of things that started happening when we blocked VPNs is I started getting weird emails, hundreds of emails per day. I got emails from this insurance company that was saying that my product is critical for their work, and they've been using it for 4 years. And I said, well, what's your account name? And they didn't have an account name because they've been abusing it over free VPNs. I got a wonderful email. I have this, I kind of always laugh at it, from somebody saying that they are too spiritual to use a regular internet connection. And the policeman or military is monitoring their internet. He doesn't really know if the police or military are monitoring their internet, but he has to use a VPN. I'm like, sorry, man, we can't support VPNs. And he kept sending me emails. I started getting weird emails from people from these auto-blocked anonymous emails. People who use VPNs are weird, saying, please restore my access. I can't even respond to this. I was getting 10 emails a day from like, please restore my access, nobody, sent from mail from Windows. And then on day number 10, I got a Gmail like this, and I responded to this person like, sorry man, VPNs are not allowed anymore, there's too much abuse. And he said, okay, but I want a refund then. I said, oh, give me your account number. And I looked at this guy, was one of our biggest customers. I did not want to block this person. And this is kind of where kind of the last bit of puzzle comes in, and this is also from Cathy Sierra's book on mismatch. She says, when you start chasing kind of these weird edge cases, you can solve it for one edge case at a time. I could have enabled his IP address. Problem solved. But that's not how the product improves. She has this kind of theory where you should solve for one but extend to many. We need to implement solutions in a way that lots of users will benefit from. So I realized, okay, VPNs are a problem because kind of people can abuse our website by switching over VPNs, but we don't want to block commercial users for blocking VPNs. And we said, well, if you're a commercial user, you can use a VPN, no problem at all. If you're a free user, sorry. So we ended up with this kind of error message that's saying, hey, the VPN feature is only available to commercial accounts, click here to pay. And we ended that month with a 24% increase in revenue, which was fantastic. So kind of, you will never, ever satisfy everybody. And that's kind of reality. Some lizards you'll never kind of work with. And after we've done this, I got a follow-up email from the spiritual guy that I'll always keep and I show in all my slides. So the point is not to optimize for every idiotic edge case, of course. The point is to use unexpected use cases as signals so we can improve our product and make it better for everybody. Because if you can make your product work well for crazy people, then it works incredibly well for normal people, and then you start realizing that crazy people are not as crazy as you thought. So that's pretty much it. To finish things off, there's 4 things you need to remember about this. Learn how people are misusing your product, zoom in on one behavior change at a time, then kind of clean up the logs, focus those messages, figure out what's happening so you can have good assumptions about what's going to happen. And try to figure out what are the obstacles put in front of these people and try to remove the obstacles, and then measure, and detect unintended impacts. And the first 4 letters of this are LZRD, so you can remember it as kind of lizard optimization. I wrote a bit more about this, and you can find all the references for kind of the stories I told you about in the book. And if you kind of can't remember something that's that long, kind of the 4 steps are then kind of lizard alert, zoom in, rescue them, and double check. Thank you very much. I hope I've tickled your imagination at least a bit.
How are you?
Good.
Good. Nobody ever asks people that, you know, but I really wonder how you are. Okay. No time, no more time. Just like, you know, an American, how are you?
How are
okay.
you?
I'm fine, thank you. But I've been down, so it doesn't really matter. Okay. How to determine whether the user is a lizard or they are just stupid? Love that. Michal.
Talk to them. Talk to people and ask what they were trying to do. Try to observe them. I think one thing I've learned from UX research is that it's a lot more effective to observe people at what they're doing than to ask them what they want. Try to observe people at scale. There are things that will record web sessions or product sessions and then replay them back to you as a video. Try to kind of start from the point where somebody got to an error screen that you're focusing on, rewind it 2 minutes earlier. Figure out the patterns there, and then figure out what people are trying to do. And then again, you know, the question is, even if people are stupid, do you want to support them or not?
Okay, what percentage of exploiters can you convert into customers by changing the exploit into feature? And won't they just leave your product?
So I think this is very, very contextual. I don't know. Like, when we did this for that VPN thing, we converted about, I don't know, like, so if the commercial usage is 10%, we got a 2.5% increase on that. So we converted something like 3 or 4% of exploiters to commercial users. And getting 3 or 4% more users is a significant growth, especially because you can do it for different features at a time. So I think this whole game about percentages is wrong, because lots of times we looked at a use case that a tiny percentage of people were doing then, but by making that use case more normal, we got a lot more customers for the future. So I think it's kind of improving the product so you can open up a different market, or you can get more customers from a different market. That's really interesting, not just the exploiters at the moment.
Okay, thank you. How to decide whether the new edge case is worth chasing?
How to decide whether a new edge case is worth chasing? So I think that has a lot to do with product management. I think there's a couple of techniques that are useful for that. One is from a book called Lean Analytics called The 5 Stages of Growth. That's the one I use. And that's kind of figuring out what stage of growth your product is in at the moment and what behavior changes are crucial to support growing the product at that point, and comparing and seeing whether you want to improve stickiness or whether you want to improve kind of payments or whether you want to reduce support costs or something like that. I've had good success using that model. So I think we don't have time to go into that a lot, but Lean Analytics, 5 stages of growth.
Okay, we still have 1 minute, 52 seconds. So, have you considered that some people simply exploit the software because they find it fun, like the all equal text? How can we detect that?
Yes, some people just want to watch the world burn. But at the same time, those people are already on your website or your app. They're using your product. The acquisition cost for those people is done. That's the most difficult part. They're having fun with your product. That's amazing. That's a wonderful basis for a relationship. And I think if people are having fun in your product, even in unexpected ways, some percent of them are interesting to kind of look at as a feedback loop for what else the software should be doing. So, yeah, we had people using mathematical symbols to push it into the text-to-speech system. Mathematical symbols are a high Unicode range. There's like an R letter, there's a O, all these kind of things. So there's this whole kind of fancy writing thing. And the software was throwing errors then. But I realized like I can support this. I see an R letter there. It's not the Unicode R that's kind of Latin, so we did normalization for that. And people find fun in it. There's a wonderful book by Nesrine Changwell now. She used to work at Google and Spotify. She calls about a product creating delight by surprising people and supporting them in use cases where they didn't even expect to be supported. So if somebody's having fun with your system, that's amazing.
Okay, look, it's supposed to be over, but since you finished a little early and we were really good on time, I think we can have another question.
Okay.
And actually, there's a huge battle between the questions here and now.
Okay.
The ones that's winning by one. This is so exciting. What is the best way to find at least some of these exploits and unexpected use cases before production?
So I think you can find exploits and unexpected use cases by doing exploratory testing. Now, the problem with that is you don't actually know if this is real user behavior or not. And I think this is where the tools and techniques we use for testing, we can move to kind of the phase in production to actually measure with the real users. But I think if you want to do it before production, UX testing, testing on kind of trial users, beta testing, these things are amazing as ways to get feedback. Opening it up to a small percentage of users and then seeing what they do, showing a fake door or what Marty Kagan calls a gentle deployment, where you give people an option to upgrade to a new version, a small percentage of people or like 100 people, and then see what they do to figure out their behaviors and whether they're matching your expectations is really important.
You're so amazing. Ladies and gentlemen,
Thank you
Gojko
very much.
Adzic, thank you so much.